So, who's gonna take a wild guess? I can't, I'm sorry, I had to split out the pictures from the emails and I just couldn't remember all the stuff, but I bet somebody has an idea of what this is. You want to throw it out there for me, somebody?
Attila hot poppy.
True that. We're looking at some Attila hot poppy. The interesting thing was that I forget who sent this. If you're here, feel free to unmute yourself and tell us about it. Are you there?
Yes, that was me.
Okay. Yeah, tell us about it.
So this is actually a Attila hot poppy that was in my front yard in a place where I used to live. I don't live there any longer. So actually a friend planted this. I didn't actually not plant this myself. But it definitely was planted without really any design purpose. And it's clearly one of these plants from the, last Friday's class, we talked about if they're not really controlled, they really, really spread.
Mm-hmm.
And they get really wide up to like 6 feet. So this was still not super tall, like they get really tall and wide. This was still pretty short, but was definitely almost 4 to 5 feet wide. So,
but what intrigued me was how short it was and how long it had it been in there.
It's been pretty established. So it had been in there for a number of years. I don't know exactly how long, but it had been an established plant for sure, which is also surprising. Yeah, that it was so short.
Yeah. Do you think probably maybe somebody weed whacked it or something or coppiced it and then it just came back that much?
Most likely, and somebody that maybe didn't know what it was, like when it wasn't in bloom, and it kind of looks potentially like a weed if it's not in bloom like that. So for sure, yeah.
But in its own way, kind of cool because you said it was like a foot or lower than 2 feet high. So really unique, in its own way. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting example. Let's quickly, here's one. Who sent this in?
Oh, I did.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Well, this is a plant that I found on the sidewalk. Actually, that's part of the garden where a community garden. No, it's not a community, it's a school garden. But it's been there for, geez, I'm not sure, probably more than 15 years, I think, because the people who designed that garden, that was a while ago. So they turned it into a tree.
Yeah.
And it's just pretty striking when it's in bloom. Right now you can't really tell, but
and we're pretty sure it's a Caliandra californica. Those leaves look really big for that.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But the flower looks just like it, and this is a close-up.
Yeah.
So
I see it. Yeah.
I mean, I have other pictures. I'm not 100% sure. I was doubting myself because of its shape, and
I think without seeing it in person, I'm curious. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so sorry, it's a little blurry, sending things through email, then uploading, all that. Who can tell me about this one? Okay, epilobium. I think if you're familiar with these plants, that would be pretty clear. And then I think, it looks fairly compact. It looks pretty happy. This looks like it could have been taken yesterday. It's the time of year that these plants are blooming, so I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, let's go back. Somebody sent in, here, let's look at Phil's. Okay, here's Phil's submission. I can't make it any bigger. Won't let me. So can you guys see that small picture in there? And I bet you can tell what it is.
Is that a buckwheat?
That's a buckwheat. And it's labeled as a Theodore Payne buckwheat, which makes sense. It's low growing. It's kind of trailing over this wall. And yeah, so the observed specs are that it's 1 foot tall, 4 feet wide, and the actual specs on the tag or whatever are would be that 1 to 2 feet tall, 5 to 10 feet wide. You know, you gotta love buckwheats. You can just cut them back. There's not a lot of stress about cutting back some buckwheat and keeping it. It says, does it need maintenance? Could be dead. Oh, could be, could be dead. No, could be dead-headed in a month or so. On my screen, it says, could be dead-headed in a month or so. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you can cut that. It's pretty hard to do those flowers individually. Let's see. I think the main part of this practice is just to see if you're, you know, what you're seeing lines up with what the specs you might see as you're shopping for plants if you're not familiar with them. Let's see this one. Oh. Okay. Eric and his magic mouse. Okay, here we go. This is an interesting one. If I could just get it to be a little smaller. It's not working. Smaller, 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 not bigger. There we go. Okay. So here we have, can you guys tell roughly from these 3 photos, I'll have to scroll them up, what we're looking at?
Is that an Arctostaphylos?
Yes, Arctostaphylos. There isn't an ID on the cultivar or species. So obviously a shrub, not a ground cover. And the assessment of this appears to be mature. Is it full size? Possibly. Is it flowering? No. Does it need maintenance? Yes. Has branch dieback that need to be removed. Noted older pruning scars. Indicated shrub has been pruned over time to provide open branching structure. However, there are numerous pruning stubs that were branches that were not pruned close enough to the collar. Note, manzanita are susceptible to branch dieback, important to prune in spring after winter rains. Most true.
I think that's supposed to be moisture.
Moisture.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, you caught me. Moisture sitting on pruning cuts can allow for entry of disease. Diseased branches must be cut back beyond diseased wood. Pruning tools should be disinfected between cuts. Care must be taken. Pruning in persistent warm weather can create undue stress on plants. Always a balance. True, and we're going to get into pruning as we go along. Okay, we better move on. We got a lot of stuff to cover, a lot of soils, and we'll, oh geez. Let's see, did it do that to this? Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here we are, week 3, and we did our homework review, and I don't need that. Okay, so the objectives of this session. So we're talking about soil today. Objectives of this session, understanding soil is vital to successful maintenance and customer satisfaction with your services. The students will be able to identify soil texture and its relationship to infiltration. Identify soil-based problems faced by native plants and describe the proper soil management through use of mulch and amendments. Okay. So when we're talking about soil, they have 4 components. Minerals broken down from rock, living and decaying organic matter. So on the left, you'll see the solids, that's the minerals, and the living and decaying organic matter, or the humus. That includes all twigs, dead leaves, live bugs, live worms, living and decaying organic matter. On the right, you'll see in the pore spaces, the stuff you can't really hold in your hands, air and water. This is a little misleading. On the left, we see almost an attempt to describe a ratio between the mineral matter and the organic matter, which is, the organic matter is quite small, whereas on the right in the pore spaces, it almost is telling us it's a 50-50 ratio, and we know that's not true. So anyway, just know that the 4 components of soil, air and water being an important part of that, which we forget a lot of the time. Soils provide 3 basic functions. Can you guys see the slides? Thumbs up. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Just want to make sure I'm not just talking over somebody's homework before. Let's see. Soils provide 3 basic functions for plant growth. True. So they anchor plants. So they provide that medium that the roots can hold on to, and they allow for microbial and fungal activity, and they facilitate moisture and nutrient movement. This class largely focuses on the 3rd function. Soils capture moisture and store it. Plants use this moisture to grow and move nutrients through their bodies. Plants also rely on soil moisture to obtain nutrients that reside as molecules in the soil. Once dissolved in soil moisture, these nutrients move into a plant as the plant absorbs the water. Moisture movement is the key aspect that pertains to healthy native plants. So infiltration issues are big obstacles to maintaining a healthy garden. This lesson addresses infiltration issues and identifies which natives can flourish in slow draining clay soils, which present one of the toughest challenges to plant survival. In the back of your this week's lesson in your book, you'll see a list of plants that accept clay soils. So usually those plants, they're adaptable to clay soil. So that means they don't need it, they don't require it, but they can handle the denser soils. Just take a look through all those, and it's a good guide when you run into those kinds of soils. So the things to remember: moisture moves nutrients, and soil is the medium that holds the moisture and the nutrients.
Hey, Eric,
Yeah,
I just have one comment. I mean, I noticed that it mentions microbial and fungal activity.
yeah,
There's no real distinction or value placed on the mycorrhizae relationship, which we know now is really big in terms of getting nutrients and water to the plants.
yeah. That's what we're saying right there. In that, I mean, we're not separating out the microbial parts of in that section. We're not separating that out. I'm not being clear. So we're
No,
not.
I understand. I'm just saying that I think it just needs to be more.
Okay.
Because it's important. That's all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Soil texture. Okay, soil texture. This is basically how you start to understand the drainage of your soil. So soil texture is a classification method based on the proportion of individual particles of sand, silt, and clay in the whole soil. So 3 components all have differing shapes and sizes. Soil texture can be determined using a simple on-site test of texture by feel. So we're going to run through those textures. Also, you can do a test with a glass, like a mason jar, straight glass mason jar. Hold on a second. Looking like that, straight glass mason jar. I marked mine out. You can't really see the strata in here. Whoa, that is completely out of focus. Let's see if I put it by my face. Anyway, I think you get the idea. I have some marks here because of the blurry thing. It's not working very well. I have some marks here that mark where the soil is. You can look this up. It's a texture test, and I think they just call it the mason jar test. You fill it up halfway with soil and the other half with water, and then you shake it around. And within the first minute or so, you're going to see the sand dissolve out. And then after a couple hours, you'll see the silt. And then next, you'll see the clay. Let's talk about sand. On their own, sand, very coarse particles. And if you, on their own, they don't hold minerals well. The open, permeable nature of sand allows roots to grow, stretch out, and develop easily. That is true. My experience with sandy soil is that I could pull out a mustard seedling that was approximately, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches. And yet the root was about 1.5 to 2 feet. It had to work so hard to find moisture in the sand, and the sand was so loose it provided that. That was really enlightening. So moving on, next size particle is silt. Silt is often sediment material that gets carried by water runoff or flooding. So you'll see that in alluvial situations along with sand. It feels like flour, baby powder. So it's slightly gritty, but not like sand. Clay particles are the smallest particles, microscopic, actually, so are silt. Although, no, you can see silt particles in your hand, individual ones. Clay, they're often, they're flat plate-shaped particles that fit together densely. I believe we get into the actual shape of clay later on in the lesson, but they kind of sit on top of each other. So sand is sitting like this, balls, coarse balls hanging out. Silt is in here like this, kind of diamond size in this case. And then clay is not as big as my hand. This is really bad ratios, but they sit on top of each other, and that's why the water can't get through. It also expands and contracts with water. As you can see, it's cracked, it's contracts. It has contracted here and cracked due to the lack of moisture. And then if you add water to this, it will expand out. I think we all have experienced that. So here's an example of sizes. Sand, 2.0 to 0.05 millimeters. Silt, 0.05 to 0.002 millimeters. And then clay, much smaller. Here is an example. Oh, and I think we have, oh, this is interesting. Okay. This is called the soil texture triangle. This is how you can figure out and describe your soil. The soil texture triangle uses the relative percentages of sand, silt, and clay to classify soils into textural classes. If you haven't played around or looked at this before, it can be a little confusing. And can you guys see my mouse at all moving across the bottom? Yes? Okay, so sand, as your percentage of, you go to the left, your percentage of sand increases. As you go upward on the left, your percentage of clay increases. And as you go downward, your silt increases. So if you have a 50%, like mine was 50% sand, and then I line it up with the 50% silt, and then I look for the 10% where those two 50s cross, and then I land on 10% clay. I have a loamy soil according to that, although my personal experience with it doesn't feel very loamy. It feels more, well, if it is loam, it is a very compact loam. So I found, okay, my experience with the jar test, it's interesting, but it's very hard unless you have, it's very hard sometimes to see the individual strata in the bottle test. Has anybody else done the mason jar test? Yeah, what was your experience? Sorry, I can't see your name. White shirt.
My experience was I had to wait a couple days for everything to sort of settle down
Yeah.
and make sure I not disturb it, just set it on something where I could take a look
Mm-hmm.
and monitor it.
Yeah. And then how did you feel about the strata when you were done?
Well, the percentages are really like, it's hard to say, oh, this is 10%.
Yeah.
Because it's so small, like when you're even
Yeah.
a big jar, like it's so small.
Yeah.
But I think like my experience with a lot of these types of a lot of these like classifications is like silty clay is pretty much, you know, it's more on the clay side.
Yeah.
So as long
Yeah.
as you're sort of roughly in that, like in those quarters or the thirds or whatever,
Yeah.
then you're close enough to know what you need to do with those plants.
Yeah. And I think you also will get into the, you do it by hand and then you start to really get a feel for these soils. If you don't have a lot of experience with soil, just get your hands in there. And originally this was all supposed to be done in person. So forgive this slide, it's an in-class exercise that we can't do. Place a handful of soil in your hand, add a few water, add water a few drops at a time until it gets just a little soggy. Squeeze and knead the soil to break up all the lumps. Add water as needed to keep the consistency of a stiff cookie dough. When the lumps are broken up consistently, squeeze the soil into a ball and open your hand to see if it keeps the shape made by your squeezed hands, called a cast. If the cast immediately falls into pieces, this indicates a sand texture. So you've been there at the beach, it's wet sand, you open it up, it just doesn't stay there. And if it remains in a cast shape, but then breaks apart when you barely touch it, it's a loamy sand. If it just deforms around the tip of your poking finger, it may be a sandy loam, unless it forms a ribbon. Try to squeeze out a thin strip of soil. Somebody's going to show us how to do this in about 10 seconds. Try to squeeze out a thinner strip of soil from the cast between your thumb and forefinger. If the soil makes a short ribbon, it indicates a loam. If it forms a ribbon more than 1 inch long, it indicates a clay loam. Very strong ribbon. So, and not only that, you start to feel what's going on in your soil. You can feel if it's sandy. You can feel if it's just, she's going to show you how it sticks to your hands. If it's silty, if it's clay, it's going to come off. Let me move on to this. I'm going to stop my share and then go try to find.
Eric, we had a question in the chat.
Yes.
Someone asked, can we practice soils on Saturday in person?
Yes, we can. Absolutely. We can dig some soil up and practice this. Okay, that reminds me, has everybody got, it's on Eventbrite, right, Makita?
Yes, and it's
Okay.
also on the USGBC LA page under trainings.
Okay, so everybody should, well, if you're interested and we recommend it, we're gonna have a live, on Friday, we're gonna have our first part of our irrigation class. And then on Saturday, we're gonna have a little tour of the TPF irrigation and how we deal with it over there, site analysis sort of. Okay, so I believe this is, do you guys see the window for the YouTube?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I'm gonna play now.
Soil texture is basic.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Soil texture is basically the composition of the soil in relation to sand, silt and clay, with sand being the coarsest fraction and clay being the finest. Now, it's important to understand your soil texture as it has some major implications on soil management. It's important because it influences water holding capacity, water infiltration, nutrient retention, and erodibility of the soil. Soil texturing is an easy thing to do. There are two main ways that you can determine your soil texture. The first is very simple. It's a soil test and sent away to the lab for a particle size analysis. The second, also quite easy, is to do it yourself in the field. It uses your hands and some soil, a very easy thing to do. Firstly, we take our soil that we've sampled, you take it in your hands and you give it a nice little push together with your fingers just to break up the smaller pieces. Anything that's more than about 2 millimeters in size, rocks or coarse fractions like that, should be removed before you start texturing your soil. So we break it up, so we've got a nice palmful of soil and we can begin our soil texturing process. If the soil's dry, then I would suggest adding just a little bit of moisture just to help it all come together. And then using your hands, push all the soil together, work it between your hands until it forms a nice moist ball. You don't want it too wet, but you need it to come together nicely. We may need to work it for 1 to 2 minutes, and we really want to feel in this 1 to 2 minutes what's present in our soil. So if you've got coarse sand, you can really feel the coarse sand within the soil. And while you're spending the 1 to 2 minutes, why don't you think about what you can feel? I often close my eyes to help the process. For example, if you've got sand, especially coarse sand, you can really see it and feel it in the soil. If it's a fine sand, it might be slightly more difficult, but holding it to your ear, you can often hear the fine sand in there grinding together. Now, clay is very much like plasticine. It forms a nice ball that holds together, and it's often quite sticky. And if you've got a lot of silt in your soil, like this one appears to have, it stains your hands quite a lot. It feels silky to the hands, so it's important to take that time to really feel what's in your soil. So when you've worked it together for a while, the next process is to form a ribbon. So we push it between our forefinger and our thumb. And in pushing that, we're creating what we call a ribbon. And we do this a few times so that we get an average across the ball. And I'll probably get about 3 out of this one. Push that through, and it looks like in the surface soil, we're getting little ribbons of about 1 to 2, maybe 3 centimeters maximum. Then you can use a ribboning chart to assess what type of soil type you have. So you should be able to now determine what the water holding capacity is likely to be in your soil, the best plants that are suited for your soil, and any potential issues that you may have going forward in your production system.
All right.
When I first saw Nick Bradley, I was sure I'd be able to
Oh,
outdrive him.
no.
After all,
Oh,
he's only
Jesus.
5'7" and he's 50 years old. I'm taller and in better shape than he is. But boy, was I wrong. This guy crushes drives off the tee. I'm
Oh,
talking
no.
about 300 plus yard drives every single time. You know how he does it? It's using the same secret he gave to Justin Rose to help take him from 125 to 5 in the world.
Oh,
The
Jesus.
same secret he gave to 6-time major champion.
Nathan wanted to hear that.
What's the secret?
Oh my goodness. Hold on. I don't know if Eric knows how to unmute himself. Let's see. Hold on, everyone. Eric, if you can hear me, you're gonna have to unmute yourself. The microphone at the bottom, just
Controversial system. So
I'm
when you're
stuck
ready to
in a
unlock your
nightmare
full
here with
genetic
this,
potential for maximum
this,
distance,
if I can stop your video.
300 as possible.
I can't
And
find the
begin
window,
crushing those long drives straight down the center of the fairway.
but
Then
we're getting a
click the
great
link,
golf lesson.
watch this video, and start
Eric, you
playing.
can use Alt Tab to find the windows, or if you have a Mac, you use Control or Mac Tab.
And share your video again, Eric. I muted your video.
That is,
One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right,
Stop your share.
but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong. It's like a gazillion hours of me on the internet. In almost every case, I'm talking about the universe, black holes, the Big Bang, time travel. God.
effects.
What I'm going to do this masterclass is teach you how to think. The goal here is
I'm
to
lost.
train
Eric, can you stop
Nightmare.
your video?
see the world.
I can't
differently,
find it.
to
At the
question
bottom of the
what others
screen,
say,
at the bottom, there's a
to
pause
realize
and
that there
stop
are
recording.
3
No,
categories
not that. There is your screen share. You can stop your share.
of the objective truth.
I'm not
that shape our
sharing
understanding
right
of
now.
the universe. The interesting thing about an objective truth is that it's true no matter what. Imagine that.
Okay, can you stop the video that's playing right
I
now?
You will
can't.
be equipped
It's-
with some of the
it's,
methods and tools
On a
so
window
you can
somewhere.
turn data,
Minimize your screen. Go to the top bar.
information,
Use the
knowledge.
minimize
knowledge.
option to minimize all the screens, and you should be able to find the screen that's playing.
We all have susceptibility to bias. Search engines on the internet are the epitome of confidence.
Or Eric, just close all your web browsers. Maybe that'll work.
Correct. No.
All right,
The good thing about science
all right.
is
I'm
that
gonna
it's
have
true
to,
whether or not you believe it. What does it mean to be skeptical? What does it mean to be convinced by data? A
I'm
proper
gonna have to
skeptic
restart this session,
questions
I
what
guess.
they're unsure of,
Sorry,
but
folks.
recognizes
Yeah,
what
just
valid-
restart and you grab Control again. Sometimes that happens.
Okay, do you want me to stop the session and have everyone log back in again, or
Okay, okay,
you got it?
Jesus Christ, man.
Okay, and now go back to your screen at the bottom and click on the video so we can see you.
So we can see you sweating.
Oh my God, I am dying here. Now I gotta reload Office.
Should we have everyone take a break?
Yeah,
Or
take a break. Go have a drink of water or something. I'll be back
Okay,
in
take
5.
about 10, everyone. We'll be
Yeah.
back at 5:51.
Don't sweat it, Eric. Everything's good.
That video, yeah, that happened last time too, and I could find it, but this time it just disappeared. Feel free to enter this poll or vote on the poll. Read it. The results from a settling jar test indicate a soil sample with 50% clay, 30% silt, and 20% sand. Using the soil texture triangle, which I will share. Would you classify it as? And then put your vote. I'll be right back. That's funny. Somebody could have made a video of me panicking about
No, no, because that's happened,
The
you know, because
video
that's
taking over.
happened to everybody, you know, that's happened to all of us.
I don't know.
Yeah, seriously. I
Anyway,
mean, how do you think
so
we?
is everybody back? Thank you. I appreciate your words. So I really
It's true.
appreciate you
It's true.
helping me
That's
out.
how we learn. By the way, Eric,
Yeah.
while people are coming back, I wanted to say that I sent you an email with
Mhm.
another picture
Yeah.
of that plant, because I
Oh,
would
okay.
love to know what it is. And I
Yeah.
think then the picture I sent is clearer,
Okay.
but still, I'm not sure if that's gonna come.
I'm also going to send you to a great tool, which is called iNaturalist. Have you used that?
Oh, yeah, I'm a member.
Sometimes, yeah. So sometimes that can help you. If there's a plant that looks similar to the Calliandra californica, that one really looks like it has really big leaves compared to it. Then they might send you, oh, it might be this also, you know, and so
Sure.
you can verify. Is everybody back? Did we take enough time? Yes, I'm seeing people back. Okay. Oh, somebody changed their mind. Let's see. Okay, so now I'm going to do it. 50% clay. 30% silt. Go down to the silt line, and then 20% sand. Yeah, this is the part I got. Whoa, this threw me off there. 50, 30, 20. Oh my God. 20% sand. 30%. So, oh, there we are. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of confusing if you haven't noticed. Okay, so our votes are in and we have 27% clay loam. I'm going to end the poll. Bam. So the results are in. 25% said clay loam. 56% said clay. Silty clay loam got 13% and silty clay got 6%. So clearly it's not, this triangle isn't as easy to use as you would think, or as they make it out to be. I find it a little confusing. So what I had to do was go up from 20% sand up until I hit the 30% silt, and that lines up with 50% clay. So there we are, smack dab in clay. So the important thing to remember is that, you know, so loam, you hear people talk about loam a lot as, oh, can I cancel this? Oh, share results, there they are. 25%, 56%, 13%, and 6%. So I'm going to stop sharing. Are we done with this? Can I just close this to make this go away? Are we back on only the PowerPoint slide, everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I close the poll.
Thank you. So the important thing to remember is, okay, so loam is kind of considered great for vegetable and agricultural uses, ornamental gardening. It holds a fairly high amount of water while still allowing excess water to drain away, but don't fear native plants. They're not restricted to loam soils. Their adaptations allow them to flourish without high levels of nutrients or retain moisture. Many of the native soils of Southern California are within the sand or clay soil classes. So, you know, they're used to running lean. Native plants exist on our native soil, and you know, we just don't have loam all over the place. We're not growing. It takes a fair amount of work to get a loamy soil if it's not naturally there. And you don't need to do that for your native plants. We don't recommend it. Moving on to, here's a quick example of sort of a quick diagram of the soil particles. The water occupies the pore space. These sizes aren't accurate. Okay, it's just an illustration, and you could, I think we should flip the one based on what I told you earlier about how clay particles are formed. We should flip the box on the right. We should turn it to the right once, because they really sit on each other. Let's see, more like this. So here's a book, here's another book. Here's some pieces of paper, and they sit on each other like this. So you can imagine dropping water onto this pile of papers, which is representing with a very, oh yeah, that's not working. You guys get the idea. If we dropped water on here, this water, yeah, you might get some absorption through the paper, but it would most likely it would have to wiggle its way through to get down and get moisture down to the lower parts of the soil. Whereas if you had a pile of golf balls, that water would just roll right through. So here's an example, or just a visual again. Sandy soil. It talks about, interesting, they don't really tell you about the flow rate of the water, but let's say you had a hose running for, let's say, a gallon per minute. I don't know. And here you can see, and I think we can kind of intuit this, that the water doesn't really spread out as it's going through sandy soil. It goes pretty much straight down. After 15 minutes, you're at 12 inches. After 40 minutes, you're at 36 inches, 1 hour, 48 inches. 24 hours, you've hit the 72-inch mark. So that's about 6 feet. Whereas with clay soil, the water, if you apply the same amount of water, it's going to take 4 hours to hit to 24 inches. And the water, your water is going to spread out. So that's not really a bad thing. So having some clay in your soil, it's going to help spread that water out and help the roots also spread out and go deep. Otherwise, like I said in my mustard example, I really wish I had a picture of it. That mustard seed is going straight down looking for that moisture, and the top dries out really quickly. Moving on, measuring infiltration with the percolation test. This is another sort of intuitive thing, but it's good to do the actual test. You'll see different specs on how to do this on the web. So it's not an exact science, but it gives you an idea. For the purposes of this class, we're going to go with these specs. Dig a straight-sided hole about 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide. Fill the hole with water and let it infiltrate or percolate. Check every 30 minutes until it fully drains. You want to make sure that the hole is straight. If you curve it, it can create a different result. So if you have fast draining soil, that's less than 30, it's going to all drain out in 30 minutes or less. With rapid infiltration of water, rooting will also probably be deep. Medium is a loamy soil, 30 minutes to 1 hour. Is the soil newly excavated and filled material? This can be expected to settle further. Plant deep-rooted species and do not compact. Yeah, so I guess if you're working on a new site and you dug it up and moved it around a lot, especially if it's clay, you can expect that soil to settle even more. So yeah, keep that in mind. Slow would be clay soil, more than 1 hour. Route surface drainage away from this area so that extended rains do not keep it saturated. Yeah, that can drown out your plant. The plants won't be able to get oxygen. It can cause root rot. Let's see, what was I going to say here? Okay, let's move on. Maintenance implications, sandy soil. Oh, okay. So the amount of clay in the soil is also the main influence on infiltration. Slow infiltration is usually one of the two biggest contributors to plant death, the other being overwatering. The small spaces between clay particles hold moisture very well. This means that water does not infiltrate rapidly. When there are large spaces between particles, soils can act like a sponge to quickly soak up or drain off rainwater. Compacted, oh, okay. Do not cultivate or work the soil, especially clay when wet. This will destroy the soil structure, compact the clay particles, and decrease infiltration. Yeah, so if it has been raining, or similarly, don't water the soil heavily and then try to work it if you're working with clay soil. You can really damage your soil. You can compact it even more, and just give yourself problems in the future. Another thing I thought we were going to mention. Oh, nutrient holding capacity. We're getting there. Okay, I'm ahead of myself. So here we have sandy soil. You got a lot of air, a high percentage of the mineral and solids, and then a little bit of water. Clay soil is going to hold a lot more water, less air, and the solids are about the same. Compacted soil can be a lot, so the ratio that changes the ratio between the solid parts and the air and the water. We can show you some examples. You can get compacted soil without having clay, by the way. So just keep that in mind. You can, so DG is a good example of a compacted soil, sandy soil, compacted. A DG path would be a compacted soil. We have an example on Theodore Payne. You'll see it on Saturday if you come, where we have some soil that is almost purely sand. And if we did a test, and I'll try to bring a jar, we can shake it up and you'll see that sand settle out really fast and the water just flies through there. Same soil farther down that's broken up a little more is we can fill that hole with water and it will take over an hour to drain. So that will happen if you have a lot of traffic on that soil, trucks, when they built it. I don't know how they built it, but that's definitely what we're dealing with over there. So you can have compacted soil without having clay. Water holding capacity, also called field capacity. The amount of water the soil can hold. Clay soils have a high water holding capacity and sandy soils have a low water holding capacity. So they're just not going to hold on to it, and the clay will. So if you keep applying water to the clay, you're just going to have a saturated soil. And this is going to affect the plants that you pick, your emitter spacing, and we'll get into that in our irrigation classes. And then the length of application for your irrigation. We'll talk about that more in probably the next class. Does anybody have any questions about that, where we are right now?
It looks like Kelman Gibbs may have a question.
Okay. Let me pull up my chat. Sorry if this is obvious to most. I'm a little confused. Do we try to amend the soil? If so, what is ideal? No. As I was trying to say, not to worry. Don't amend your soil. If you're doing vegetable gardening, you may have to set aside an area that you will work for specifically for vegetable gardening. But in this case, it's about picking the proper plants. And it's kind of this wrap up here. Pick your plants properly for your soil and your sun and water conditions. And then as far as your irrigation, it's going to change how you how close the emitters are because of how the water infiltrates into the soil. And then it's going to change the length of application. So the point is, don't worry, there is a plant for the soil that you have or the soil that you're working with as far as native plants go. because you're going to choose them wisely. Yeah, I'm looking for that slide that said you can't change your soil. Yeah, the amount of material you'd have to introduce to change your soil is just, it makes it practically impossible. And then you also have to be careful about introducing material into the soil because you can actually make it worse. If you introduce, let's see, sorry. Okay, so that helps. Yeah, so you can actually make your soil worse. I'm sorry, I can't remember a specific example, but there's a way to create adobe, which is brick-like substance, if you start adding material into your soil. So just be really careful. It's not worth it.
It's like adding sand to clay. That's a real big no-no.
Yeah,
Turn it
add
into
sand to
concrete.
clay. And if you're not going to add straw, but if you thought you were, that would create a adobe brick. So just be careful. And if you're going to do an amendment, I would do some real research on the area. Sooner or later, those roots are going to have to contend with the natural soil in the ground. So that's another thing to keep in mind. They're going to outgrow whatever amendment you drop in there sooner or later. All right, summary of soil qualities. Okay, I think we get it. Sandy soil, the infiltration rate is rapid. So if you go down vertically from sandy soil, you can see the infiltration is rapid. The water holding capacity is low. The nutrient holding capacity is low. The aeration is really good because they're really large particles and there's a lot of air in between there. Your loamy soil, the infiltration rate is moderate. Water holding capacity is moderate, moderate, and moderate. So, it's not that loamy soil is undesired for native plants, but what we're saying is you can work even if you can work with native plants even if you don't have the magical loamy soil. Clay soil, slow infiltration, high water holding capacity, high nutrient holding capacity, and the aeration is moderate to poor. Okay. And that's LAUSD calling me. Anybody else get those LAUSD calls constantly? So the gardens you may maintain may have, let's see. You know what, before we get into this, let's take a little break, another 5-minute break, and then we'll jump back in, okay? So we'll come back. Well, let's make it 4. Let's take a real short break. We'll come at 6:10, okay? So I was seeing some things about gypsum. I've never used gypsum. Generally, as I understand it, that's for agricultural settings. And generally, the point of the native plants is not adding as little as possible, doing as little as possible to the soil, and more working with the plants in your plant knowledge to get a successful garden going, working with the soil that you already have and understanding the requirements of the plants to create the best situation. that's the general line if you're working with native plants. I can't speak on gypsum. I've heard opposite things on applying horticultural gypsum to clay soils. Yeah, so exactly. So, you know, once you start adding things, you know, unless you're really, I see, I'm using gypsum after I did soil analysis. Okay, you know, so that's, you know, a kind of play at your own risk thing. I don't use gypsum. And generally we don't recommend that for people unless you really know what you're doing. Okay. Oh, okay, here you go. The gardens you may maintain may have clay soil, but you may not have been planted with that in mind. You may need to replace failed plants with those adapted to clay soil, like the ones in the handout. So check out the ones in the handout. There are a few others that somebody had mentioned. A Butylon palmieri can handle clay soil. Berberis nivinii, Carex spissa, Erigeron WR supposedly can handle clay soil. Iris douglasii, Salvia appiana. You know, I hear it back and forth. Some people say use that in good draining soil, and it's definitely recommended. And then I keep hearing people say that they have success with Salvia appiana in clay soil. And I think the approach there would be water a lot less. And, you know, I have pretty compact soil at my own house. And when I use it, it just grows a little slower than in good draining soil. And then Salvia spathacea or Spathaceae, depending, can also work in clay soil. Pathogentic. Oh, that's interesting. That's cute how the C drops off there. Okay. Pathogenic activity. Soil pathogens are microorganisms that cause plant diseases when spore cell or fungal hypha invade a plant by way of soil. Tilling breaks up the soil food web, so keep it to a minimum. Feed the soil to feed the soil food web to feed the plants. That's a strange sentence. So basically, soil is a pretty, yeah, that's funny. Soil is a pretty complex thing. So we've got the living and dead things in here. We've got the fungi. There's your mycorrhizae. Rhizal, I never know how to say that. And it's basically how these critters help break down the soil, and then combining with the fungi and the plant roots to get that to get the nutrients into the plant. Okay. And then from there, the plant goes to the various above ground critters to then create your ecosystem. So let's see. The point of this is when you start breaking that up overly, I mean, you're going to dig, obviously, to make your holes and stuff, but you want to leave that intact as much as possible. The most familiar diseases caused by soil pathogens are root rots and vascular wilts that affect below ground tissues. Rot problems can include seed decay, damping off of seedlings, and root and crown rots. Vascular wilts start through root infections, and the problem circulates through the vascular system of the plant, which presents as drooping leaves, stunting, and damping off. For example, a common condition of a new planting is poor water infiltration and extended periods of saturation around the roots. The pathogen Phytophthora spreads, it's a fungal pathogen, spreads rapidly by producing small swimming spores when the rooting zone remains saturated for as little as 4 to 8 hours. Wounds are not needed for infection. Avoiding an outbreak of Phytophthora involves buying plants from reputable nurseries, storing plants above ground or on surfaces that do not collect standing water, planting so that plants do not sit in planting holes with wet roots, ensuring that the added irrigation does not pool near the plant stem, and cleaning tools between work sites. Generally, in healthy conditions, pathogenic organisms are held in check by a multitude of beneficial microbial activity. So that's a lot of stuff there. But basically, that's why you need to know what's going on with your soil. If you have a clay soil and you keep adding water to it, you're creating the conditions for pathogens. They can also work on heat, I feel. You know, we generally recommend that so heat can increase those pathogens. That's why we recommend that you water in the cooler parts of the day and more specifically in the morning after the ground has had a chance to cool off. So I don't know if that explained anything to you guys. Does that make any sense to you? You know, if you've got a wet soil, so the watering cycle is this. It's a sawtooth wave. You water, and then the plants need a dry out period. You water, and they need to dry out. And as the plants get older, that frequency becomes much longer. At first, it's depending on the size of the plant and the soil, it's more of this, up and down. Imagine you go up a roller coaster and well, that's a bad example. I won't do that one. But think of a sawtooth. So it goes steep up here and then long down here. And then the teeth of the sawtooth get extended as the plant has a longer life. So they need that dry down period. So if you keep, unless they're specifically riparian plants, then they can handle that water. They're adapted to that. So don't create the situations for pathogens in your soil by either adding material that shouldn't be there, breaking up these relationships, or adding too much water at the wrong time. So salts really quickly. Some plants can stand a lot more salt than others. Many of our natives thrive in these salty conditions and they live naturally on ocean edges. But inland gardens, salt may become an issue. Fertilizers and compost can increase salt levels, especially in dry environments. Irrigation water may deposit salts that build up in containers and small planting beds that are hemmed in by buildings and other hardscape. Winter rains can usually wash this accumulated salts away. Yeah, so that's why small waterings, you know, this sort of 15 minutes at a time that can accumulate, your soil can accumulate salts in that way. You also have to be careful if you're using gray water, which we don't necessarily recommend, but a lot of people use it. Your detergent can carry salts and you have to change your detergent. And what that does is it inhibits your roots from picking up moisture if they get too much salt around the roots. And moisture is how they're getting their nutrients, right? The dissolved nutrients. Okay. Compaction. Some compacted soils are clay, but not all, as I mentioned. Sometimes we use the term compacted when the soil is actually hydrophobic. It repels water because the soil has dried beyond a point where it easily absorbs new moisture. The only way to decompact soils is through plant and organic matter. The action of the roots does the work for you. Yeah, so you can, these are not California native plants. They're native to somewhere. But you can see that it looks like they're trying to give us an example of turf grass versus some sort of native grass and what it can do to help break up the soil. So, you know, let's see. Oh, okay. With compaction, the problems, the solution is slowly wetting the soil. It's a couple things. You want to slowly wet the soil. If you have a soil that's really compact and the water is running off, and we'll get into this in irrigation, you're going to like burst irrigate. You're not going to drop, if the plant needs, and we'll talk about that, 3 gallons of water, you're not going to drop 3 gallons of water. Obviously, if the water is flowing off the surface of the ground, it's not getting the 3 gallons. Most of it's running down the hill. So you have to work, you design your irrigation, you have to know the soil you're working with, do your tests, and design your irrigation so that the water actually absorbs into the soil. It has to be applied properly. That's going to be the rate of application and the distance between emitters, as I mentioned before. Yeah, again, you can put, this is where you use plants that can use compacted soils to help break up your soil. Well, for one, you might just have a plant that you want to keep, but it can also help change the drainage of your soil. Okay, managing soils. So any questions that I may or may not be able to answer? Anyone? Oh, I don't like that. Chat? I don't see any chat action.
I didn't really understand the roots image in that compaction slide.
Okay, here we are. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it. I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, let me see if I can try to explain it to you. I guess they're just showing you what roots can do to help. They can either, like some plants can actually thrive in these compacted areas, and then what roots can do to help also loosen the soil or add a little.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Clear as mud?
No, I appreciate you explaining that.
Okay.
I wonder
Yeah.
like what kind of resources, we could look at to explain that, but I guess just sort of thinking about it and then
Start
your experience.
think about things with tap roots, like for instance, poppies. They have those little tap roots. They can really help break up your soil. A lot of wildflowers, that's like a quick way to start working on your soil. Lupins, things like that. Lupins can actually, they're nitrogen fixers, and they can help you break up your soil and improve that soil if you feel it needs it. Okay, so managing soils. Mulch is one of several types of material laid on top of the bare soil. Mulch is different from compost. Compost has already been decomposed. Mulch has not started the decomposition process. LADWP's customers that have applied for the rebate are required to have 3 inches of organic mulch. Okay, not compost. So bark nuggets, which generally aren't recommended. And I offhand, I can't remember why, but chip mulch is really useful. Let's see, and we're going to get into that right here. Why use mulch? Okay, so mulch helps you conserve moisture. It helps reduce weed growth by covering the soil. It helps alter the chemical and biological composition of the soil to some degree. So it takes a while, but this stuff will break down and help change your soil. Indicate pathways and focus points. Create an interface between different garden function areas. Give the garden a more finished appearance, and mulching trees and shrubs can create some aspects of a forest soil environment, even in sun-baked landscapes far from any forest. Yeah, I guess so. So if you're going for a certain look, you would use the proper mulch related to that look to achieve that. I think that's what we're saying there. Yeah, keep your, let's see, we're going to get into that. Okay. I'm going to get through these slides, and then if these questions are still pertinent, I'll answer them. Types of mulch. So we have tree bark mulch, decomposed granite, as you saw in that one house we looked at a couple weeks ago, rock and gravel, leaf litter. Yeah, so plants will create their own mulch over time. Your salvias, a lot of plants, and you can take their cuttings and you can cut them up and create that mulch. And I mentioned, so a lot of trees do that. We know that oaks do that constantly. Sometimes you need to remove it if it just is getting too thick and crowding the plants too much, depending on what you have going on underneath there. But leave some, don't completely leave the ground bare. And but it's great for mulch. Sycamores, I mentioned, I kind of have a thing, that's my personal thing. Some people are all game for sycamore, but they can look messy to me a little bit. And so I still like the mulch. So like I said before, I'll take the bunch of sycamore leaves and I'll crunch them up just to kind of speed up that mulch look and leave them under the tree. So it still looks kind of natural, still has that natural color, but the leaves, the whole leaves aren't there, sitting there all over the place. Leaf litter, yard waste. Yeah, okay, so that's you. Depending on what you're trimming, what you're cutting, be careful. You don't want to include weeds in your self-created mulch. So be selective. If you're cutting up, if you're trimming back those salvias, collect those salvias. You can do so many things with them, but one of them is to cut them up and use them for mulch. Post-consumer paper. Yeah, apparently you can use shredded paper. I personally have not done that. Anybody have experience with using shredded paper as mulch? That I'm hearing no. Yeah, I don't think anybody is really on that tip right now. Petrochemical products. Oh boy. So I think we're here because we're trying to avoid those things, but just to FYI, a lot of times those will be the types of things that don't change color when they're hit by the sun. They're made out of various things. They've had color added to them. And then, yeah, so they can also break down. Add your microplastics to the soil. You're just not going to help yourself if you use, they will break down eventually. And I don't care if they say it's biodegradable, it doesn't matter. It's biodegrading into something you probably don't want in your garden if you're going for an ecologically minded garden. Gorilla hair is not recommended, especially in fire-prone areas. Yeah, some people think that gorilla hair works well on slopes. And yeah, you would want to be really careful about using that in an area like, where if you're in a fire area, because it lights up really fast. I've had that experience myself. I was trying to warm up a irrigation fitting, and there was a bunch of mulch nearby, and I didn't get into a big fire situation, but it just caught and started going. I pat it out, but it moves really quickly through that. So the finer shredded mulch is always going to catch on fire faster than the thicker bark. And I am quickly going to say, if you ever are working on a fire garden or what do you call those? A Firewise garden, you're going to want to check out the mulch combustibility tests that they did at University of Nevada. And I'm not going to run through it all right now, but you can find the mulch that they found works best and catches least. It's least combustible. It's actually, I did that, and in our own fire management garden, I wasn't able to find that exact mulch, which is like composted bark mulch or composted bark mulch, I believe. But I used what I learned in the study to select the best I could find from the mulch place. So that's it on mulch. Tree bark and other shredded wood materials. Historically, tree bark and other organic wood-based mulches have been the most popular material for use as mulch in ornamental landscapes. Tree bark or an equivalent shredded wood-based material, organic, is required for the LA DWP turf rebate program throughout the project areas. So you can't use gravel. And those are all, the other types of mulch are perfectly fine. But you can't get the rebate. They have a very specific requirement to get your rebate, and you can't. Sorry, I got distracted from that. Somebody said, I've seen mulch started with a cigarette butt. Yes, so keep that in mind. So those other mulch types that we mentioned, DG, gravel, all that, perfectly fine to use and appropriate in many cases, but you're not going to be able to work within the DWP requirements. Keep the mulch, as somebody said, keep the mulch away from the plant stems. So you want to keep them 3 to 4 inches away from the crown of the plant. You're going to, you're just going to keep the air from getting to that part of the plant. If you get a green chip drop from your local tree trimmer, that comes in, and it can be quite hot, and it can create a heat situation in your garden, and it can kind of interact with the nitrogen in your soil. And I think somebody mentioned that earlier. So you might set it aside and let it dry out a little bit, or before you drop it right on your property. And you can feel the heat a lot of the time before you drop it. Like I would be careful if I was doing an install and dropping fresh green chip drop on my plants. Does whoever was mentioning that, any experience, or would you like to comment on that?
Say that one again, I'm sorry.
So whoever was mentioning about the bark interacting with the nitrogen in the soil, would you like to comment on that?
Oh, hi. It was more of a question. I had heard that when the mulch starts decomposing, it steals nitrogen away from the soil for, you know, to do the decomposition.
It's not that significant. It's not so much that it's going to damage your plants if the mulch is dry. Okay, sorry, I have a lot of slides and I'm going to try to move through these as fast as possible. I think we lost a little time with the YouTube snafu there. Decomposed granite, great for the most drought tolerant of our natives, best laid down to a depth of 2 to 3 inches, can help retain moisture in the soil. Useful for the important fire-wise 0 to 5 foot zone next to homes as a non-flammable mulch. May count as hardscape for rebate programs. So keep that in mind. Designing for fires, for Firewise Garden takes a fair amount of research, but nothing that you can't learn in a day. Rocks and gravel. Gravel mulch may not be allowed by the rebate programs, depending on where you're applying. Although it is very useful in installation of desert gardens, use in various size intervals, starting with the larger rocks and working your way down to a 3/4 size to create a natural look. Yeah, so you put the big boulders in, the mediums, and sometimes you just even spill them in there. And then the small rocks, you drop them on top and you fill the holes, and it helps create, because imagine if you went the other way and then you have a giant boulder sitting on top of a lot of small rocks. It just doesn't look right. Leaf litter includes pine needles, oak leaves. Try to avoid removal of leaf litter if you can help it. It contributes to soil biology and carbon. It also acts as a natural mulch. Careful not to let it pile up too high, as it can inhibit the germination of annuals and cause crown rot. Yeah, so scoop it away from the crown of the plant. It can also, so the germination of annuals, the germination of weeds, right? So it's kind of a little game you're playing there. Usually the amount of, like on a Salvia apiana, which you see here, you're not going to get, I don't think, enough to really inhibit your poppies or something that will be coming up nearby. Organic recycling of yard waste, yeah, includes grass, hay, and straw. Be wary of hay. It can include weed seed and create a large issue in the garden. It's best to compost these types of materials before application to the garden. If you've ever seen a hay bale sitting around for a while, it gets rain, it starts sprouting. So just FYI, if you get a load, if you get a hot tip on some hay and you decide to use that as mulch, you will get some interesting stuff growing, maybe even some wheat. Shredded post-consumer products, here they are, like newspapers, cardboard. These are best applied prior to wood mulches as part of the sheet mulching approach. Okay, I see what we're talking about here. You can also, I have a friend who uses newspaper to create their sheet mulch. They use rolls, and I'm going to give him a shout out. His name is Jim Evans, just because he's the guy I know started doing this. Gets a roll, it's like a 4-foot wide roll of newspaper, newsprint, and it doesn't have anything written on it, and you can use that. You can use about 2 or 3 layers to create a sheet mulch, and I can tell you how it's done, but not during this class. Petrochemical products, I think we talked like sheeting, geotextile, rubber bark mulches. Do not use these. Yeah, don't forget to take the tape off the cardboard. That's a good one. Yeah, the weed fabric, just doesn't work generally, and you're just creating this, oh, what a mess. So you're just creating stuff that's going to the pile up on the hill sooner or later. And the weeds will make it through that weed fabric. Just be careful. And then you're also monkeying with your soil when you cover that. You could get into a sort of, what do you call that? Solarization issue if your fabric isn't permeable. How to mulch? Mulch well with a 3-inch layer. Be sure not to pile mulch against the trunks or stems of plants as it will rot them. Yep. So you want to do that, and then you're going to less likely to get unintentional germination, meaning weeds. It's going to suppress them. You're still going to get some tough ones getting through, but sometimes they'll grow in the mulch and they're super easy to pull out. Amendments, just say no. Healthy soils do not need additional fertility, which may only encourage weeds. You get quick growth, but typically not sustainable. So yeah, you want to just work with the soil you've got. It's probably good enough. Again, you select the plant properly, you irrigate properly, and you're going to create a healthy plant. If you, a lot of times, if you just add those high nutrient amendments, you end up creating this top growth, and that's not really what we're looking for. And sooner or later, this plant has to deal with the soil that's underneath that amendment. Oh, okay. So here's some quick tips on using mulch as a business opportunity, I suppose, for professional consulting and extras. So soil analysis may refer to a variety of techniques conducted for several possible reasons. Most analysis is conducted by a lab. Wallace Labs in SoCal is a good resource. You might want to write that down. You can cost about $75. You can also perform infiltration, soil type, and general health estimates for your client. Typically, this is included in preliminary consultations. Yeah, I think we mentioned that. You go over to the site, you bring a shovel, you dig a little, you scrape around, you see what you're, you put some water in the ground and you see what you're dealing with, and then you can kind of, it gets you started on your plant selection. And you can also start having a conversation with your client about what you're dealing with their, and the different ways you can either address those soils, as we mentioned. Yeah, the soil composition is kind of interesting, or the analysis is kind of interesting. I do not need this. Yeah, somebody was mentioning earlier that it's generally used for agricultural, so you can find out the makeup for phosphorus, nitrogen, all that stuff, ratios. And then you can also find out your heavy metals in the soil, and that would be if you're installing a vegetable garden. Okay, let's see. Planned replacement for program for mulch. Yeah, so you might, some people they want a really tidy, well sort of manicured garden. And then that's when you might start saying, well, I come back every 3 months and put in the mulch along with the trimming, the assessment, the checking the irrigation, all of that stuff. Yeah, that you build that into your maintenance program. Best management practices, so BMP for soil health, testing soils in multiple locations before and after installation, microbial activity, compaction, infiltration rates, report to client in writing showing starting points and improvements through natural soil plant affinities. So you could, see if, so you got the beginning garden, you could do a soil sample if you wanted to do that whole thing and send it into the lab. And then in 2 to 5 years, you could do another one and see if there's any significant change. You could also do infiltration tests before and after. I don't know if I would expect the infiltration test to change much between design and installation, but maybe a few years down, you might start getting a change. I pulled out the lawn in my own property, and I can tell you after adding a lot of mulch and not really doing much improvements beside that, I have a soil that actually drains reasonably, and it was really compact and shaved off that grass. And so just, that's the advantage of being with a garden over time. Homework. Okay, cool. Oh, wow. I've just flew through that so much. I'm going to get you guys out of here early, and I can take questions too. So homework, infiltration and ribbon test. Check the infiltration rate and soil texture at a work site. Take a shovel, dig a hole. Remember to dig the hole straight down. And yeah, there's going to be a certain amount of concaveness at the bottom, so don't worry about making it perfectly flat, but just try not to dig it too much of it in a diamond shape. Estimate the texture by feel. Fill the hole with water. So as you're pulling that soil out, you're gonna, if it's not already wet, you're gonna start to feel what's going on in there. You're gonna want to have some water nearby to not only fill the hole with water, but also to do this ribbon test and try that out, and then compare it to your, let's see, is it in here? You'll see this soil texture by feel. It's a whole flow chart, and it's written in very tiny print. The print, they just keep using smaller and smaller print. I don't know why. That's it. And you can start to, you can see the ribbon test here. So within that video and these quick little panels, hopefully you can perform that ribbon test. Fill the hole with water and use those specs that we saw earlier to indicate whether it drains quickly, medium, or slowly. Bring photos of the hole, full and empty, as well as timing notes next class. So email them to me, but I'm going to type in my email one more time because I love doing that, at theodorepayne.org. Oh, let's do this. How do I send it to everyone? There it is. So Teresa says the process of decomposing mulch can leach nitrogen from the soil, but the impact of this is minimal. So you kind of answered your own comment to me. And the fact, these plants, yes, they use nitrogen, but they're used to running on lean soils. So the amount of nitrogen you're going to pull out of it is most likely not going to affect your plants. Let's see, I'm just going to scroll through here. I hear fresh mulch can give some fungus diseases to the plants. Yeah, if you don't get a clean chip drop, if somebody, if you've got a diseased tree, maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they're like, somebody says, come cut down this tree. I mean, hopefully you've got a tree person that knows what they're doing, and they're not going to do that to you. But hey, who knows? You gotta, if you get to know somebody and you trust them, then I would do it. If you're just pulling some dude off the street, it may be risky, and I would get a referral perhaps. If you have a dense matrix of plants, so Nathaniel, sorry. if you have a dense matrix of plants where once established, there is no space or bare earth between plants, can you avoid the LADWP rebate requirement? Yeah, because you're putting in a new garden, not an established garden. And that's why you got to use mulch. And then as it grows, absolutely, your plants can cover the ground and you won't need to use mulch. Can you still hear me? I'm kind of mumbling, I see. Yeah, why is gorilla hair not recommended? Yeah, for the fire thing. I think that's the main reason why. Yeah, some guy flicked it. I mean, I wouldn't panic about somebody flicking a cigarette on my, I wouldn't make my mulch decisions based on somebody flicking a cigarette on my garden. But yeah, it goes up pretty quick. Any questions?
There's a question in the chat right now.
Okay, thank you. Bark decomposes and adds nitrogen to the soil. It in its process, I guess this is a little over my head. So the decomposition, can anybody speak on this?
I think I can.
Okay, please do.
Well, you know, this is about carbon, correct?
This is about bark and its relationship to nitrogen in the soil as it decomposes.
Well, I have no idea why nitrogen would get pulled out of the soil when you're basically adding like plant material that's broken down and breaking down. You're adding that material back into the soil.
Yeah.
Is it going to be bioavailable? I don't know. It might turn into, there's two types of nitrogen. There's NH3 and NH4.
Yeah.
And one type is easily available because it has a positive charge, one type is easily available. There's one that has a positive charge and one that's neutral or negative charge and neutral. I can't remember which one's which, but anyway, the reason mycorrhizae is so great is because it provides that neutral type that's readily available to the plants and doesn't like leach through the soil.
Yeah.
There's nothing about the plants decomposing that's going to take that NH3 and turn it into NH4.
Right.
It would just, you know, it would actually collect more with the organic matter and add organic matter and potentially add more NH, whatever it is.
Right. So here we have Stephanie saying that's why you put it on top. Don't mix the mulch in with the soil. That's when it's problematic. So yeah, I could see that working. And you're only really dealing with the top, you know.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
It used to be an issue when they were using straight dried wood products.
Uh-huh.
I mean, think of it as composting. You add green and brown. Okay?
Right.
So you're adding that on top of the soil. And if you got any decent, healthy biology in the soil, it's going to break it down. It's not really an issue. I mean, if you're not going to be putting strict, pure wood chips out there, I doubt. I hope not.
Yeah.
So it's not really an issue. It used to be maybe years and years ago. As a matter of fact, they used to provide mulch, wood chip mulch with nitrogen in it. So that's not really an issue anymore. If you're just using like, you know, wood chips from your local tree trimmer.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's why, because I just, maybe that's why.
It's not an issue.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for clearing that up. I hope everybody feels a little more confident about that. Yeah, you could use, if you want to go check your own site with a shovel that's fine. It's better if you go to a site. I mean, you probably, if you've been using your own garden, you kind of know the soil, most likely. If you know, it'd be good to get out, try something new, see what's going on, start to use your thinking parts about how you would work with this soil and what kind of plants you would use in this soil if that was a place you were going to plant. So if you can't get to another place, that's fine, but we're really, you know, just yeah, get out there and like if you're working on somebody else's yard, do it there. If you can't make it, go use your own place or someplace you visit often. Okay, don't go out digging a hole in the lawn at the park. Okay, any more questions? It's 6:58. I know you're all dying to get out of here. And
I have a comment that's kind of interesting.
okay,
When I was at Santa Cruz, they had somebody did a test where, you know, they had these fields and they pulled all of the cows out of them. And all of a sudden the fields these meadows started to decline. And so then they put cows and sheep back in the meadows and they did a blind study. And they found that when the cows and sheep were stepping on the grasses and like breaking holes into the ground and pooping on the meadow, that everything did a lot better because of that little bit of disturbance.
yeah,
Wasn't a ton of disturbance. The whole thing wasn't compacted, like, you know,
Yeah.
nobody drove their car over it back and forth, but just those little holes and things from the footprints helped. And I think that's kind of the way you want to think about like everything, you know, with a traditional garden, you know, construction, you tend to put mulch everywhere at once because you just like did a huge project, but
yeah,
ultimately you're kind of trying to like return it back to that natural where like things, you know, leaves have dropped and it's helping to keep moisture and add the nutrients back in.
yeah. That's a great comment. I can totally see. I wonder how long it took the field to revert either way, like without cows, with cows. It'd be interesting to know.
It was within 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, they started to see a decline and then they started testing. And so, I mean, this was a graduate program, so they,
Interesting.
it was a thesis thing.
Hey, if anybody has to go, feel free to go. We're done. Please send me your homework. Otherwise, if there's more conversation, I'm happy to hang out. And thanks. Thanks, Meryl. I appreciate that.
Thanks for a great class. I learned something.
Yeah.
Appreciate you
Oh.
guys.
Well, good. Okay. You learn, watch out for that YouTube, man. It's a killer.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you.
Eric.
Okay.
Thank you, Makita.
Yeah, so sign up, Eventbrite, sign up and we'll go over we're gonna have our irrigation class, then we're gonna have a site visit at Theodore Payne. And of
Okay,
course,
see you
there's
on Thursday.
always subjects that cross over. It's all, you know, you end up covering a lot of different things, not just irrigation. Okay, somebody was going to say something, Makita.
Yeah, I was just saying, thanks back to Anjali. And on this Friday, there is a class.
Yes, there's a class on Friday, and then we have the on-site thing on Saturday morning.
Okay.
So it's a lot going on this week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Does everybody know about the Eventbrite invite, or has anybody received it?
Yes.
Okay. That's great.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So when I click on the link to go sign up for the irrigation or the pruning classes, there's 2 time slots. Is that significant, or the first time slot, 8:30 to 10:30 or whatever it was, or 8:30 to 10 was full on both of them. So I signed up for the second time slot. Is there a difference between the time slots or?
No, it's the same class. It's just that we have 35 people and it's too hard to drag 35 people around the garden
Got it.
at
Okay,
once and yell at 35 people.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had
uh,
a question from the first class. It's about watering when you install the plant. So
Yeah.
I wrote down that you water the hole, you
mhm.
water the container, you plant the plant, and then you water over that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so remember back, you saw the video where he dug the hole out?
Yeah.
Okay, so you dig the hole and then you fill the hole with water, but what do you have on the outside? You have all dry soil. And so if your pot is pretty well, meaning your plant has been irrigated the night before, not 5 minutes ahead, because it can create a loose soil and your whole container can crumble on you. So
Okay.
you want to water it the night before.
Okay.
Or if it's wet already, don't worry. You put that in the ground. Then when you backfill, your soil that you're backfilling with is dry. So that's why you want to water again.
Okay.
To get the, just uniform moisture on your new planting.
Great. The water the night before is important. I didn't catch that the first time. Thanks.
Yeah, if you're, I mean, you can judge if your plant pot is moist enough to make it through to the next day when you're planting. But yeah, if you add a lot of water to a plant in a pot, and then immediately take it out of the pot, it can just kind of crumble and fall apart on you, and that is going to give you problems with your planting. So FYI.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anybody? Okay. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you on Friday, all of you. And looking forward to getting your homework and those pictures of wet holes. That's weird. All right. See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.